I grew up probably about 20 miles, 25 miles south of here, right where 1787 intersects with 1787. 1788 intersects with 1787 on about 200 acres with a farm and a place that my dad and my uncle named Eagle's Nest Glider Port. So my dad was a pilot, and he taught people how to fly gliders. And when we were growing up, he was building us this house, which I know a lot of people have seen from the video that my team released. And, you know, things changed. I mean, my mom got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and, you know, I don't know how much you know about that disease, but it's very debilitating. You kind of lose a lot of your ability to do, you know, the majority of what you're used to doing each day, you know, walking, feeding yourself, changing diapers, I mean, you name it, and it even begins to affect the way you speak. And so over time, you know, that disease kind of took her over. And there's no cure for it. You know, there's vitamin therapy, there are different ways to sort of offset the effects of it, but there's not really a way to, there's no cure for it. And so at the time that we were growing up out there, my dad was building us this house, and you know, my mom was sick, things got bad. And when you're growing up at a young age, you don't really know why they got bad, you just know that they got bad, and they got really bad. And then next thing you know, we kind of find ourselves, 5 kids out there with each other, and not much else. And so from that, you know, you kind of roll with it. You know, life is life, and you kind of accept things for what they are. Again, when you're that young, you don't really think about it. I mean, you can only think about it from your perspective, which is, I'm a, you know, an 8-year-old, 9-year-old. I see what's happening. I don't understand it, but this is just, it was normal for me. And anyway, my sister, who I didn't get to talk about during the 3-minute video that we had, you know, got to record, she actually dropped out of high school her senior year to stay home and take care of us. And, you know, from there, we just did the best we could. Luckily, you know, God blessed us with a really caring community. They would come out regularly and check on us and make sure we were doing okay. And that was that. You know, we got to the point where we started playing sports, and you know, when you live that far out and you're trying to do extracurricular activities, it becomes really difficult, because then, you know, you have to find a way back home, which, you know, after the bus would leave following school, there was no, you know, transportation back out to where we lived. I mean, 30 miles, it's like, how do you get back out there? So, you know, we would occasionally stay with friends in town so we could do track practice, band practice, football practice, and it got to the point to where, you know, these families were eventually like, well, why don't you just live with us? And that's kind of what happened. You know, I was raised by, you know, a family, actually 2 different families, one of which was the McCandles that, you know, people know about from the video. But there was another family as well. A good friend of mine, Donovan Polk, and his family, his mom, Catherine Skurlark, took me in. Donovan and I were in band together, and I lived with them for a short while before living with the McCandles. And so I you know, want to make sure that, you know, I give credit to their family as well, because they were a big part of my life at the same time. So anyway, I graduated high school, went to Texas Tech, and left Texas Tech. I got into this internship program. Texas Tech has an amazing internship program. I mean, anybody who's sending their kids to Texas Tech and is interested in public service, they should apply for the internship program at Texas Tech. It's amazing. And so I did that. I got into this internship program, and then 2 weeks after graduation, I'm headed to D.C. I had about $500 in my pocket. I knew that half of that, if not more, was going to be gone by the time I got to D.C. And when I get to D.C., the first thing I do is I'm like, okay, I got an internship, which was not paid. So I was like, okay, well, I got to get a job as well. So I got a job, interned for Congressman McCall for about 3 months before getting hired on full time, and worked my way up to get to where, by the time it was said and done, I was advising him on foreign policy, defense policy, energy policy, trade policy. And, it's funny because the majority of people in Midland and Odessa just remember Brandon Batch, the football star. And, I've done that was a great experience, but I've done a lot of things since then. And if they don't think I'm the football star, they think I'm my brother, which I've gotten a lot as well. They're like, oh, you're the artist. And I'm like, well, the only thing that I can really do art-wise is draw stick figures, so no, that's not me. But, it's okay. I've I've kind of been Barron's younger brother, little brother for the majority of my life. He was the running back, at Texas Tech while I was there, so even at Texas Tech, I was Barron's little brother. So that's just kind of, when you have a brother like him that's made such an impact, you're actually kind of okay living in his shadow a little bit. So yeah, that's that. I mean, after I left D.C., I got to the point to where I started noticing little changes in myself in D.C. And I kept a journal the entire time I was there. A good family friend of ours recommended it. She sent it to me, and I started keeping a journal. And one of the first things that I wrote about was how, when I started noticing my moral compass shifting in ways that I didn't like, when I started noticing me referring to my job in D.C. as politics instead of public service, when I started noticing that I was becoming jaded with it all and less optimistic, that I would leave. So I spent about 6.5, 7 years in D.C., and slowly but surely, I started noticing these small changes in myself, and I knew it was time to leave. And so I moved to Austin. My brother Brian, who lives in Austin with his family, was working on opening up a restaurant there. I called him, and he said, Brandon, come help me get this restaurant off the ground. I said, okay, I'm there. And 2 weeks later, I'm on the road to Austin, and we opened up a successful biscuit shop called Bird Biscuit. Well, it's been a blessing. I mean, when we first started on that journey, we expected it was going to do well. I think that we were a little bit overwhelmed with how well it did. I remember at one point I'm sitting there with my brother, and it's the first day that we opened. Pretty much every system that we had planned and had in place at that time kind of failed us because we were just so busy that, but that's kind of how these things go. You plan for what it's going to be like, and then of course when it's not that way, things kind of go a little bit haywire, but it was okay. And I just remember I'm in the kitchen with my brother, and we're wrapping up sandwiches, and I look over at him, and I was like, Brian, this is going to be a special thing. And he just kind of looks back at me, and he's like, I know. So from there, the restaurant's doing well. I miss it a lot. Biscuits in a weird way kind of taught me a lot about life. Everybody kind of told us what you have to do to make a good biscuit in terms of the process behind it. And, really I'll give the credit to my brother. My brother's, and I'm a similar way, but he's like, you know what, let's do our own research. Let's find out what we consider to be a good biscuit, and let's use that process to then, go about doing all this stuff. And turns out by the end of the day, we spent about a year of testing after we had opened. And when it was all said and done, the biscuit process that we had in place was the exact opposite of what anybody ever told us that we had to do to make a good biscuit. And then, of course, Austin Monthly names us best biscuit in Austin. So in a weird way, that's kind of informed my political philosophy, which is just because something's been done a specific way for a long time does not mean that that's the best way to do it. And so I think pragmatism, from the small business standpoint, really has sort of opened my eyes when it comes to public service and what I consider to be, some of the better ways that we could possibly move things forward and get Congress working again. So obviously now I'm back here, with Congressman Conaway's retirement, I, decided after a lot of thought and prayer and speaking with my family that, I know the process in Washington. I understand it. I've been in the trenches. I know what motivates people up there, and I know what needs to be fixed up there. I'm not saying I can solve it all, But I think what this district needs is someone who understands that process and has seen it firsthand and knows how to hit the ground running on day one. And I can do that, I think. You know, very few people have had the fortunate opportunity of working in Washington because of the way that this community blessed my family when we were growing up. They gave me the opportunity to go out and do these things. So in no other world would I have probably found myself in Washington, but you know, I did. And you know, God's kind of blessed this journey that I've been on throughout my entire life, and it's all kind of led me back to here, and I get to show people kind of what their investment in me has meant. You know, the oil and gas industry here is regional, it's national, and it's international. When I traveled to Saudi Arabia when I was in Washington, you know, the Saudis know exactly what West Texas is, you know, and we operate on such an international level that allows the state of Texas and the U.S. economy at large to really thrive as an energy independent nation. That needs to be protected. What I don't want to see, and what we're seeing right now, is rhetoric coming from liberals in Washington that think, you know, we need to turn back time, do away with energy, oil and natural gas, and somehow that's going to grow our economy. And that's just ridiculous. I mean, the amount of revenue that this state and that this nation generates based off of the oil and gas industry is incredible. It gives us leverage on the international stage to compete with, you know, countries like Russia, you know, Saudi Arabia, countries in the Middle East that, you know, are heavily dependent on oil and natural gas, Iran. And our standing in the world, because of where we are from an energy standpoint, gives us leverage. It allows us to compete. It allows us to continue to have a strong economy. And when I hear, you know, rhetoric coming from, you know, Democrats who are saying we want to ban offshore drilling, we want to, you know, ban fracking, you know, that's scary to me. So one thing that I really want to focus on and be an advocate for in Washington is making sure that, you know, people from this region in Texas in particular, but really, I mean, you know, all over the United States where oil and natural gas is the way of life, and because of that we have such a strong economy, being their voice. I mean, obviously I'm focused on District 11, but I want to make sure that where we are right now, we only continue to move forward and we don't move backward, like some Democrats would like to see. So when I talk about the economy, that's really what I mean. I mean, like I said, I handled energy policy for a long time, and you know, it's you know, it's a very, very fragile thing. I mean, a lot of people like to think of it as just being rhetoric, but at the end of the day, I don't think it is just rhetoric. I think that rhetoric, from a Democrat standpoint, they want to turn that into action, and that would harm this economy in a major way. So I want to go and fight in Washington to make sure that we preserve the economy that we have, the energy resources that we have, and we continue to grow those and leverage those in ways that allows our economy to really be at the forefront on an international level. You know, another thing that I think is extremely important that we talk about, obviously, is immigration. I mean, you know, and it's a complex issue. It's a very complex issue. You know, people try to simplify it sometimes, but it's not as simple as people, I think, would like to believe. You know, we have to make sure that we secure our border. You know, and I support the president in his efforts. I've been down to the border. I've flown with the National Guard on the border. I've been down there with the Border Patrol agents. It's a very complex border, and they're doing their best down there. We need to make sure that they have the tools and the resources necessary to continue to do their job. Because right now, because of policies that were put in place during the Obama administration, that only encouraged people from Central America and elsewhere to migrate north, which put a heavy strain on our Border Patrol agents. One thing that I've always advocated for, and one thing the president has done, is put more pressure on Mexico to secure their southern border with Guatemala. It's a much smaller border, and that's where the majority of migration comes from. Now, I understand that people want to improve their way of life, I mean, I think that anybody who wants to improve their way of life should have an opportunity, and they do have an opportunity to do it the legal way. But what I think that we should not be advocating for is encouraging illegal immigration, jumping the line, getting in front of people who have been waiting in this line for a long time, and coming into the United States and therefore breaking the law. So I think we need to secure the border first, and then we need to have an honest discussion about what immigration reform looks like. Here's the thing, and this is what I hope you know, the Democrats understand. When you start using that sort of rhetoric, people hear that. When you start using words of like, oh, well, easing restrictions and allowing it to become easier to become a citizen, that encourages that migration to move northward. And when you don't have a secure border, and when the Border Patrol agents and the National Guard down on the border don't have the resources that they need to handle that heavy influx, that puts a big strain on really the taxpayer. I mean, the taxpayer is the one that foots the bill for the Border Patrol agents and the National Guard and all the resources that are right now deployed along the border. And so it's not even so much a conversation right now about what we need to do in terms of easing. It's about what we need to do in the immediate, which is secure the border to make sure that we can have an honest conversation about what comes after that, which, you know, like you alluded to, could be things like possibly having a conversation about, you know, ways to make it more efficient, the immigration process more efficient. But we're not there right now. Where we are right now is that we have an immigration issue and we don't have the resources to appropriately handle it. The president's, I think, doing what he can, but, you know, Democrats, I think, need to work with Republicans to immediately address the issue of illegal immigration and then have an honest conversation about what comes after that. And this is a very complex issue. It's one that I spend a lot of time thinking about. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and let me say that first. The gentleman that carried out that tragic mass shooting here, you know, it's interesting because when you hear about it happening in another city, you know, it's still tragic. But then when it happens in your hometown, it's heartbreaking. And you know, I just pray for the families that went through that, and I hope that you know, God's with them as they begin to recover from that tragic accident. I don't think we should keep things the same. I don't think anybody's advocating for keeping things the same. I also, though, believe that individual, he failed a background check. I mean, he didn't purchase that firearm legally. He failed a background check, and from what I understand, got that weapon through an illegal source. What law can you possibly put in place to prevent that? And that's, I think, that's the issue. I mean, what law can you put in place to prevent bad people from doing bad things? I don't know. I think that we need to make sure that we protect an individual's right to bear weapons through the Second Amendment. I don't think that we should infringe upon that at all. I think that mental health and investing in mental health is something that we need to focus on, because and also I think that, you know, we should also encourage people. I mean, in most of these cases, what I've heard and what I've seen is that there are individuals that noticed changes within that person, whether it's their family or their friends. And I think we need to have an honest conversation about ways in which we can better identify these people and identify changes in their behavior to prevent these things from even happening. Again, it's a complex issue. I don't think the answer is infringing on someone's legal right to bear a firearm, but I think that there are many conversations that need to be had on ways to address this issue, and it is an issue. It's just such a beautiful thing to be able to carry out a vote without there being repercussions for it and without fear of retaliation. In a lot of parts of the world, that's not the case. And so we are blessed in that regard. When it comes to why people should vote for me, I mean, because, you know, I'm like them. I think a lot of people in this district can relate to my story. And I've had so many stories from people after we released that video who have poured in and shared with me sort of ways in which they connected with that video. I'm a small town guy who grew up in the middle of nowhere with no money. When it comes to why I'm running for office, the thing that motivates me the most is that I care about this community that cared about me and my family. When it comes to how I'm qualified, well, I've seen it. I've been there. I've been in the trenches. I know what motivates Congress to do and act, and I know and I've seen what special interests and the influence that they have in Washington looks like. And when it comes to why I left Washington because I didn't want to change from being myself into something that I didn't recognize. So if I'm elected, you know, I hope the voters in this district, this constituency, will know that the person that they put into office on day one is going to be the exact same person that's going to be in office 4 or 6 years from now, hopefully, or possibly longer. But I'm not going to stay there and become a different person. I will leave. I'm not looking to die in office. I mean, I'm you know, when it comes to, at the end of the day, I'm here to represent this district. I'm here to represent the views, the concerns, and the issues that the people of West Texas care about. Washington's a complicated place. There are not very many things that prepare you for what and how Washington functions. You know, I've taken a number of political science courses, and I can tell you not a single one of them prepared me for how Washington really works and what motivates people in Washington, what motivates them to act. But what I can tell you is that, you know, there are good people up there trying to do good things. I'm a pragmatic-minded person. I'm a conservative who wants to go and fight for this district, but who also understands that in order to get things done, you don't have to agree, but you have to at least be willing to sit at a table and have an honest conversation with people about what their views are. And while you still might agree, there needs to be a level of integrity restored back in that place to where people are engaging in dialogue again instead of just throwing verbal grenades at one another. That's not helping. And from my perspective, you know, one thing that I hope to be able to achieve as I continue to represent the views and the concerns of my constituency is inject Washington with a dose of integrity again. Because I think that we can talk about policy all day long, and we can talk about the issues that this country faces all day long, but until we can get to the point to where we are listening more than we're speaking, and to where we're able to remove ourselves from our own perspective, so at least we can even understand where someone else may be coming from, it's going to be very difficult to solve anything. And even if we can solve it in the short term, the fascinating thing about Washington is that if it's not a solution that sticks, the next administration can overturn it. The next Congress possibly could overturn it. So, you know, I'm optimistic that things can change. I'm optimistic that things will change. I think the president's doing his best, but I think he needs members of Congress getting elected into office that are going to go there and support him, and that's what I'll do. So it is my job to be a representative, to represent the views and concerns of this district. Oftentimes, because of the way that the structure of Washington is set up, you know, it's easy for a member that gets elected to forget that sometimes. And I want people to know that I'm not going to forget that. I'm not going to forget them. I care a lot about not just Midland and Odessa, because Midland and Odessa is, you know, I'm from here, but these aren't the only cities in the district. I want people from San Angelo to Granbury know that I'm here to represent them as well. And I will do my best in Washington to make sure that their views are heard. And that if I have to make a difficult decision that people disagree with, well, I'm going to come back and I'm going to face the music. I'm going to do my best to explain to them why I made that decision, but I'll always face the music. I will always come back and have town halls and explain to voters why I did what I did, and I will listen to them and allow them to explain to me why they disagree with it. That is constructive dialogue, and that's what Washington needs. Oh, I'm taking it day by day. A big part of the campaign, of course, is making sure that you have the funds to get a campaign off the ground. But I look forward to getting out to every single county in the district, and I will visit every county in the district. And really, the beautiful thing about it, this is kind of it's a little bit of a dream for me, because I always tell people this: people are my passion, and so when I get to go out and I get to meet all the incredible people across this district and hear their stories and how they relate to my story, I thoroughly enjoy it. I literally enjoy doing that. It's very hard for me to be at home by myself and not be out with people. I'm a very social person. And so I'm looking forward to hitting the campaign trail hard. I know that there's a lot of candidates in the race. There might be 3 or 4 more that hop in. I encourage anybody who has an itch for public service to get in the race. I mean, it is a sacrifice, but I also think that everybody who's in this race needs to be admired, because I think that what the country could use right now is for more people to be involved in this process. So that's exciting. But yeah, I look forward to hitting the ground running. Since I moved here, I haven't had time to unpack a single bag. I've kind of been living out of a suitcase for a while, but that's okay. I enjoy staying busy. I enjoy meeting people. I hope to have the opportunity to speak to people around the district and shake as many hands as possible and hear as many stories as possible. So it's exciting, yeah. For anybody who wants to reach out to me, and I encourage them to do so, they can either go to my Facebook page, just type in Brandon Batch. I have a personal and, of course, an official campaign page. Shoot me a message, and I'll reply to you. I read everything that comes in, and it's beautiful. So that's the best way to get in touch with me. I encourage people to share their stories with me about how they might be able to relate to my story, because I think that's what it's about at the end of the day. I mean, this isn't just about me. It's about people who believe in what I'm doing, helping me move things forward. I mean, this is all a concerted effort as far as I'm concerned. So I encourage people to reach out, and I'll do my best to respond to as many of them as I possibly can. Yeah.